Hey guys, it's Whynabile here, and today I'm going to be trying to do some vacuum molding. I've seen it used on Mythbusters, and I wanted to try it out. So, the materials I'm going to be using are this plastic stock from just a spinnach container for my plastic, a little butane torch for my heat source to melt the plastic, and a shop vac, a mini shop vac, to pull it into the form. And for the form, I'm actually going to be making wooden molds. The piece I'm trying to make today is a little insulating plastic washer, focus, to go over this electrode and insulate it. Sorry about the focus. And I'm going to probably glue it down around that so I have just the little central electrode coming through. So that's what I'm going to try and make, and I'll show you making the mold and trying this out. Alright, so I've got my a template here, my mold I guess, and on the back I've drilled I needed a 1.2 hole inch for the flange, so I just used a 1 1/8 spade bit and kind of reamed it out a little bit. And then I drilled a through hole, that's a number 4 hole, and I want this as big as possible so I get as much vacuum pressure. And this is basically the rough shape of the part I want. I used calipers to make the depth and the diameter of this hole. So now I'm going to set up the plastic and the vacuum, and hopefully do some vacuum molding. So I'll show you that in a sec. Alright, so I've got my mold set up. I've got my plastic covering there, although you probably can't see it. And I've used some electrical tape to make a nice seal around it, and I was careful to sand it off and dust it off so that I could hopefully get a good seal. And I got my vacuum in the back. I'm going to turn it on before I start trying to melt it, and we'll just see how this goes. Well, it definitely did something. I can't quite tell how it did yet, but I think it worked better than expected. So here's the result of my first attempt. Initially I thought it actually worked, but as you can see we didn't quite get the profile we want at all. And there's even a part where I blew through it with too much heat. So next time I'm going to actually try a thicker plastic, which hopefully I'll be able to melt a little bit hotter and get it to form the shape a little more closely. Alright, so I've got my next try set up. This time it's part of a little bit of stiffer plastic from a promotional credit card. It's not a real number. And I'm going to try that out. So I definitely actually noticed the moment when the plastic sucked against the through hole, and then that actually caused a big rush of pressure and it actually broke the plastic. So I've got to think of some way to eliminate that effect, basically. Alright guys, so I've decided to make a little screen to go in the back of the hole, and for that I'm going to be using this old iPhone case, actually, just a piece of plastic. And to make the holes in the mesh, I've made something about as ugly as sin. It's just a little nail copper wired to the end of a soldering iron. So I'll wire this up and we'll see how it works out. So sorry I didn't get any footage of that, but I think it worked about as well as I could have expected given what it was. So now I'm going to sand this down and cut it down and see what I've actually got. Just went down in sandpaper a little bit from 100 to 60, and we'll see if I can make more progress this way. So here's my final grate. I'm going to put it into my modified mold, and I think if I were really being careful I would use a little bit of glue or something to hold it in, because I think it'll work fine as it is. So now I've got my little piece in there, and we'll just have to see if it works. I've got the modified mold, and let's run it right now. So for this I'm also going to make a small modification to my mold piece. I've got a really small countersinking bit in here, and I'm just going to take this through hole and kind of make it conical so that it doesn't get, I guess, plugged up by the plastic as easily. It kind of has to, the molten plastic will have to fill the entire mold. Yeah, I don't know if you can see that better, but that's not bad. It's actually pretty good. So now let's give it another go. So I'm all set up here with my another piece of thick plastic in here, and I've got the new grate installed and the modified wooden mold. So here we go. So that didn't quite work, but I think it was closer. Let's take a look. So I've got exactly the same setup again. Last time it almost worked, but I don't think this plastic is doing so well. So I've got an even thicker piece of plastic here, and we're going to give it another go. So that's not the right plastic. So now I'm back to the new setup, but I'm using the first plastic I tried, which I kind of think is the most flexible, so let's try it out. Well, I'm not sure, but it looks pretty good. Let's see what we've got. So I'm not sure how well I'll be able to film this, but it ended up working pretty well. I can't film it at all, can I? I got kind of a bubble shape, and I did actually puncture it on the side. Boy, this is tough going. So this is kind of what I want, but I tried it, and it just doesn't fit on the doesn't fit over the feed through to insulate it. And so I'm seeing that it's making a bubble shape, so I'm just going to try and make a larger hole and see if I can kind of just use that bubble shape to my advantage. So back again with the larger hole. I'm using the thinnest plastic, and I've also taken out the grate because I'm just going to use a larger hole, and I've got it countersunk. So let's go. I think we have a winner. And I think oh man, look at this. I'm actually really pleased with this. It took exactly the shape of the mold. It's pretty crazy. And I don't think there's really any other way to form a piece like this, besides maybe like a two-part like heated press or something. But I'm really pleased with that result, and seems pretty strong. And I guess the trick, or what worked for me was being very gentle with the heat, and there's a certain point where it gets just hot enough that it pulls to the mold, and if you go beyond that, it can burn through or melt through. So just being really careful that once you get to that point, take the heat off and just let the vacuum do its thing. But I'm really happy with that part. I'll make another one and I'll see if I can replicate it. So I've got both of these pieces melted down and cut down to size, and they work pretty nicely, so I'm going to go ahead and glue them in just with some CA glue. And that should be good if we played our cards right. So I'll be back in just a bit and we'll check in on how that went. So there you go, there's the final results of my vacuum forming experiments, and I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. Except for how the camera focuses. But I feel like this is a very functional result. I don't think I got quite the resolution I wanted. I always had a kind of bubble quality to it, more than like sticking to the mold perfectly. But for my purposes, it's really good enough. And it definitely took some tries and some experimenting. So for whatever part you want to cast, it might take a little more work. But either way, I'm glad I did this. So thank you so much for watching. And please subscribe. I'm going to try and be putting out some more videos now. So I'll see you later.